All right, and I want to welcome everybody today to our Artist Run Galleries webinar. My name is Gene Maneri. I'm the co-founder of the Ella Project. My partner Ashley Keaton is on the line with this as well. And we're greatly appreciative for y'all to joining us, which what I think is going to be a really interesting and fun conversation today. We're also happy to have our friend Heather Pontonio with the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation on the call. Heather has been a major supporter of Ella Project's efforts in this arena and in others throughout the years. And I know that she's got a cool event coming up in North Carolina in July. So Heather, if you want to come in and say a few words about what you have planned coming up, we'd love to hear more about it.
Thanks, Jean, and thanks for letting me be with you all today. So as Jean said, I'm with the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation. For over 25 years, we've been funding professional development for artists all around the country and are delighted to be the funder and sponsor of this gathering as well.
Well, fantastic. And it is a super cool event. I'm looking forward to getting up there. It's been several years, but I've always learned a lot. And if you can't make it, the online stuff that they have is fantastic. And I encourage everyone to check out Artists Thrive. Sign up for their email newsletter. I got something today, opportunity that's going on in Shreveport that I didn't even know about. So Heather knew about it. I'm here in Louisiana and I didn't know about it. So cheers to the good work that you guys do at the foundation, and cheers for your continued support of us in this project. With that, I'd like to bring in Veronica Cross, who's going to be leading us through today's discussion. Veronica does some writing for the Ella Project in our Notes from Ella column. She's also an independent curator, artist, and arts journalist, so a great person to discuss with two people who have taken the plunge in different facets, and that's why we wanted to have them on, because they've taken different paths. Andrew Jackson Pollack, a glass artist here in New Orleans, who has a shop on Magazine Street, and Forrest Bacigalupi, a longtime jeweler who has a shop in the French Quarter, but his path has been a little bit different and the shop is a little bit different. And both of them I know are going to have a lot of cool things to say, and both are incredibly engaging and personable. And we're both happy that you guys have joined us today. It's going to be a fun conversation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and drop myself out. I'm going to let Veronica, Andy, and Forrest take us through today's conversation. Thanks, guys, and welcome.
Thank you, Gene. Also, I just want to acknowledge the great work that Ella Project does. Gene and Ashley, you are such rock stars in your support for artists, musicians, and culture bearers of New Orleans and beyond. And thank you, Heather, for your support as well. All right, so New Orleans is a creative and entrepreneurial city. We know that from all the art we see, either in public view, in private view. The entrepreneurial spirit can be seen in cold water for $1, right? We know how to sell things. We know how to talk to each other. There are certain mythologies and hierarchies when we think about, how am I going to sell my art? How do I break into a gallery? How do I make a living as an artist? For both of you, you came from artist parents, fortunately. I understand and empathize. And it's really a hard thing to get away from, but taking that plunge and creating your own physical bricks and mortar space is a huge commitment. Could I ask each of you, and when I ask questions, you don't necessarily have to wait for me to ask each one of you, Andy and Forrest. You can just please let this be like a generative and creative conversation that just flows. Can I ask both of you, each of you, what it was like growing up with parents who were also invested in the arts, and how it came to be that you're still in the arts? This is a hard thing. It's not easy. Either, please go first.
Forrest, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. Kind of you. Well, I grew up with two parents that were textile designers, and so they were from either coast. They met and they raised my sister and I in the middle of the country because it was equidistant to either coast, and it made it much easier for us to sort of travel to art shows all through our childhood. And we had a little farmhouse, and in the farmhouse, the kitchen doubled as the creative space, and we would stretch yardages, and they did batik and shibori and all sorts of textile design. And I was able to effectively grow up in Oklahoma and feel all right about it by virtue of the fact of their art business, and the opportunity that gave to have a sort of dynamic and sort of irregular schedule, and the people that I met within that community are some of the best people that I've ever met in my life, and that's been incredibly impactful, not only in terms of sort of creating my value system, but also just in dealing with the communities that I get to interact with. That opportunity to share and sort of elevate, it's at least my version of it that I saw was a particularly non-competitive community. It was a really supportive community, and sort of because it's a weird path, and because there's no rule book for how to succeed in it, everybody had to share information about successes and failures with everybody else. And it really was the most emblematic version of the sort of, it takes a community or it takes a village sort of mentality.
Andy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I also grew up with parents that were artists or involved in the arts, or really just appreciated the arts and supported the arts. And I think as an artist, you kind of have to have support or encouragement at an early age. My mom was an art teacher for about 30 years, and she had a ceramics company herself. And so I used to go do art shows with her. And at home had a great art room, as good as my high school art room, with a potter's wheel and markers and, anything you could want, paper and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, growing up in that environment, I now that I'm older, I feel like I didn't have a choice but become an artist. Although I did, it was encouraged, but also go to college, get a degree. I got a degree in graphic design, basically, communications, which was kind of like public relations with an emphasis on digital art, graphic design, and whatnot. And some of those things I feel like I use to this day. I think if I had to do it over again, I might do a business program or something like that. But with the internet, you can find everything you need to online. But yeah, having parents and just kind of growing up in an artistic community. As a glass artist, we have a very close community. Everybody's pretty sharing these days, but it's a really great community. And I feel like that family as well has kind of gotten me to where I am as well.
That's wonderful. So it's normalized that you can be an artist and make a living. And, in some circles, it just seems like such an impossibility. So you both had models you could look to. And Forrest, we were chatting about how you were doing shows with your mom, the big craft shows. And can you talk about what it was like to be a young person doing those shows with your mom, and the setting up, the breaking down, the preparation, the actual transactions, what those exchanges were like? And you did, was it the Red Rebel shows that were here in New Orleans also?
Red River Revel is in Shreveport, and that's one that I grew up going to with my parents when I was a little kid, and have found my way to actually participating in selling my own artwork at for many years since I started my art business in New Orleans. It's interesting. There are a handful of those kind of legacy shows. Memphis Pink Palace is another one, and there are a few up in the north sort of Midwest, and it's. I would say that growing up at those shows really fostered in me, a real sense of entrepreneurship from a young age, right? As a kid, I would, not rely on an allowance from my parents, but instead at those art shows, make money helping people set up and break down their booths, you know, running food to people, watching booths while they needed to take bathroom breaks, making my own little art pieces, and finding a fortunately kind, gracious, willing audience to buy my little keychains that I made or whatever it was when I was growing up. And that certainly set the stage for me to dig into this strange career as an adult. I thought it's interesting, and I don't know if there is anything to this, but the fact that Andy and I both grew up in sort of artistic environments, but didn't go and pursue art education, I wonder if that somehow primed the pump for us to pursue self-represented art businesses, or more, you know, hands-on, transactional, you know, transaction-focused sort of art businesses, as opposed to just being, you know, studio artists and letting somebody else sell our work. I'm curious about that, and I'm going to let that digest while we're in the midst of this. But I'm curious if that had something to do with it.
And Andy, there was such an educational component to your parents' work, or to the work that you have in fostering your glass community. There's also, can you talk about that the education element?
Yeah, I mean, I can try, you know, I mean, coming from my mother, who was an art teacher, you know, so, and she's very, when you talk to her, she talks to you like a teacher. And so I think that was ingrained in me. And now that I'm a little bit older and have a studio, you know, I feel like it's very important for me to do that and to kind of give back to the next generation, or really, I just enjoy doing it. And feel like I've learned a skill and want to share it. And there's not too many formal programs that you can go learn to do exactly what we do here. And I know I've been passionate about it for a really long time. It's a lot of fun, you know, playing with hot glass and fire, and then the history of it. And there's so many levels you can appreciate it on. And I see that in a lot of other people. And, you know, that's how we connect, be it the next generation or, you know, my friends and my peers. We can get together and, you know, talk for hours about glass. And so it's been a really positive thing in my life, I feel like, and I want to share that with other people. And I think that passion really comes through, be it your student or your customer or your, you know, friend or what have you.
Right. And then are you able to also, does that help bring in income to sustain your
It does, yeah. It really is just another facet, if you will, to our business. We, you know, we have our gallery and we have our studio, and classes are a big part of it. We've even talked about going nonprofit altogether, but for now we're kind of happy with our model. But yeah, we do weekly classes, and those are really important, not only for educating people, you know, that may never do it again as to what glass is and give them a new appreciation, to maybe someone that's going to keep doing it, you know, the rest of their life, or as a hobby on the side, or and, you know, whatever they do with it, you know, we're happy to share that. That's what we're here for. And yeah, we do have classes and bigger workshops that we sell, and it's just part of what we do. I don't think we could depend on any one of these things, these different, you know, we put our eggs in mini baskets, or not all of our eggs in one basket. So we have the studio and the gallery, we have classes, we have rentals, we have commissions, and it's a number of things that all kind of add up to help us make ends meet. But the educational side of it is probably one of my favorite sides. I have one employee who works for me, and she really helps run the books and the gallery so that I can show up and just be an artist and run the studio and focus on classes and that kind of stuff and do what I am good at and what I enjoy. So
thank you. So to both of you, did having a way to monetize, and monetize sounds like such a bad word, but to bring have an income producing gift, did that help you to envision what the potential could be with your own business? Did that help? Was that anchoring? Did you think like, well, maybe I can have a bricks and mortar business. Maybe I can have a place where people could come purchase things and also be part of this community, because that's what we do when we share art, right? We build community. did that give you the confidence? Did you feel like this could be a very real thing? For example, I know how to sell things at shows. I know how to educate people in addition to creating your craft.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to put all those things on paper when you're coming up with your business plan. And you might be surprised at all the things that you can consider, even if it's not monetary, other rewards. But yeah, it's a good idea to hash all that out on paper. I know when I did, I saw it made it feel more feasible, or at least made me look harder at this or that. But you can never account for everything. There were definitely lots of things. If we had to do it over again, it would look completely different, I would assume.
Forrest, can you speak
Yeah,
to?
yeah. In my case, there was certainly, the timing of opening up the shop came on the heels of COVID, right? We opened up the shop because our hand was forced to explore a new business model on some level. Or at least a shortcut, whatever was going to be the inevitable time that it took to reach a sort of normal functioning sort of workflow again in the aftermath of the lockdown period of COVID. But we had been talking about opening up a shop for a few years leading up to that. And that's because I think there were a handful of things that were sort of driving that conversation. But the most compelling arguments for opening up the shop were certainly an opportunity to sort of amplify what we were doing. When you go and do art markets, when you go and do shows, there's a certain swath of the community that comes and patronizes those events. And it's pretty consistent and regular. Having a shop on Magazine Street or in the French Quarter, you have the opportunity for so much walk through traffic, so much, there's just an opportunity to be discovered by people who aren't normally seeking you out. And for the people that are seeking you out, they can find you on demand, and the benefits that come with that are really important. And it's helped us, or at least it's helped, my business and my crew that we're working with really be able to expand into broader projects much more quickly than when we were just doing the art shows. And I love the one-on-one sort of I love how random it is. I've always enjoyed that part of it, the opportunity to build rapport, to share information, to educate, to learn from your customers. All of that is a really cool part of this odd sort of career path of selling your work to the public in the booth, in a 10 by 10. But in the shop, man, we talked to so many people throughout the course of the day, and the opportunity for some interesting, especially in our case, because our new business model is focused on a lot more collaboration, and we're pursuing that moving forward. And that was, the opportunity to meet people who might bring some interesting vision to the table, might know somebody that could open doors, is just, it just grows exponentially with the brick and mortar. And so that part has been certainly, something that allowed us to sort of break the ice and do it and justify committing the resources to exploring this option. But it's actually played out and turned out to be the case that's been a really important feature of having the gallery versus having the 10 by 10.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, yes, the 10 by 10. Yes, I know it well. It can be so limiting, and it's a cut and dry. It is it's a limited run. Yeah. You're
well, it's also, the approach is so different because in the booth, I feel, at least in my experience of that, you really have to create processes, and then you have to continue to lean into those processes. You're loading up, you're loading in and loading out. If you don't put the work in the same place every time, if you don't pack your car in the same way every time, stuff gets lost, stuff gets broken. You lean into process on a regular basis. You get very good and efficient at selling your work, and sort of you check the box of each part of that process. With the gallery space, with the brick and mortar, you're there all the time. The brick and mortar doesn't move. And so it requires you to be much more sort of dynamic with the way you approach. You merchandise differently all the time. It's like the focus has shifted. Rather than figuring out, the most efficient way to present your work in the most impactful way, and then to lean in on that and execute it again and again, you really you get to work sort of in another fashion that's more dynamic from that sort of systems perspective. And I like that. That's been a really fun part of opening up the shop and dealing with the challenges of starting a new business in a gallery.
Mhm. Yeah, and a brave move when we were all shut down with COVID. Yeah, completely brave. Can you all speak to what it was like to think about what kind of business model do I want? Do I want an LLC, or am I a sole proprietor? Did you have some coaching? I know that the Ella Project was helpful to one of y'all. But did you have mentors in the community you could ask? What kind of model should I have? And as I'm thinking about getting a bricks and mortar space.
Well, I know we looked. I have some of my favorite glass specific galleries. I mean, that's our thing. But I came out of Rhino Gallery and some of the co-ops in town, and really loved the fact that we had a great local glass community. I knew all of them from doing the art markets, and friends with all of them. I mean, there really is a big little glass community. There's at least 30 artists that I know of that make their living off of glass art, that live in our little city here, our little hot city, and they're glass artists. And so we kind of went with that model, a way of supporting our local glass community. It allowed us to do a lot of our work on consignment. And so, we have our artists, as opposed to wholesaling where we buy it outright, they consign their work to us. We have a policy where they can take and leave stuff. We're very transparent. We, appreciate them trusting us with their work, and we, want to represent them well. And it's mostly all local artists, so they can drop in anytime and check in on us and that kind of thing. But coming from Rhino Gallery, which stands for right here in New Orleans, it was a great co-op that has yet to open since the pandemic, and may or may not, but a great group of artists that did all the art markets for many years. That was kind of where I had come from. So that was kind of my model, but not as a cooperative, as a sole proprietorship LLC. And we had talked about bringing in partners and this and that, but I was able to build this space to suit our needs without having to do that. And so we just we're doing it for the artists. We do a 60-40 split. We give the artists the majority of that. And then even the people that work for us in the gallery, they get a commission as well to encourage sales. But that's just kind of what we came up with. It seemed kind of standard throughout the industry. There's a little bit different. Some, galleries on Main Street or Magazine Street, Main Street USA might do, 2.5 times markup or this or that. But we kind of tried to start with that as our baseline, and we've kept it there since we opened about 5 or 6 years ago. And I'll say we opened right before the pandemic, a year or two before it. And we went online. We really are online, back to the not putting all your eggs in one basket, having a good website or social media presence, or Etsy shop or whatever it may be, for maybe call it passive income, although it requires work. We were able to beef that up and make it look a little bit better. We took our classes online, and that was very cool. We actually set up multiple cameras and made Facebook groups, and we're able to teach classes online during the pandemic. So you have to be flexible, I think, is one of the biggest things I've learned.
Totally. And it sounds like you invite a lot of people into the mix, which is so generative. Yeah.
Yeah. For us, we've worked really intuitively a lot. I mean, that's not to say that there's not pen that goes on paper, and there are, a lot of ideas, a lot of lists of pros and cons, and a lot of discussions about how to operate. But when it came to structuring our business, I opened up the gallery with my sister, who's a painter. I'm a jewelry designer. She's a painter. And we've worked alongside one another and encouraged each other to grow in our own art businesses. We've shared booths at the art markets in town, at the music festivals here. We've applied to shows, together and had booths side by side for many years. And so we've encouraged each other and helped, each other along the way for a really long time. And so it made sense to team up at some point, since we knew we had a very clear understanding of sort of fundamentally how each other's businesses work. And while our art itself is quite distinct from one another, we knew that there was a way to sort of harmonize it. And so our structure was based on two siblings with very clear aesthetic visions, working together and figuring out how not to step on each other's toes, being very honest about what each other's strengths and weaknesses were. And we probably represent about 35 other artists in the gallery. And we have a core team of artists who are our main sort of collaborators. And so I'd say that there are four of us that are the main core group of artists that do work outside of the gallery, like puppet shows, performances, film work, more narrative, dynamic content with the characters that we create, and there's art in the gallery that is the sort of genesis for all these different characters. And then so out of that grows wearable art for the home. And then there's this new, this performance art that is another phase of what we're doing. But we have a very clear sort of, my sister is the sort of creative director for the business. I'm the sort of the operations manager for the business. And then we each sort of just have to have a daily check-in with one another to see where we're at. And we exchange roles and take on different roles. And it's a complicated and a little bit of a squishy sort of dynamic that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to anybody else. And it works most of the time for us really well. And it lets everybody sort of have their voice and be able to lean into their strengths. But it also is fraught every once in a while. But the one other thing that I would say that we do that is a very much an important part of our business structure, and that came from our previous work, was that my experience with doing wholesale leading up to opening up the shop is that I found when we did consignment, I've had to chase money more often than not. The work that I've had in shops has been, it gets stolen, it gets dirty, it gets broken, and there's no accountability on the part of the gallerists who are giving space for me to show the work. And I ran into that again and again and again. And so that is one of the main features of the gallery here in New Orleans, is that we buy all the work outright, so that the artists are going to get paid what they want for their work, no matter what. We pooled our resources in order to be able to do that. And we had just enough money after building out the space to be able to buy our inventory. And that way the artists are assured to get paid. And the onus is on us to respect the work, to take care of the work, to look after it. It just makes us more accountable. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's been, it also, with all of the other work that we have to do, it means that we don't have to track all of that on the back end and figure out how to pay. I mean, it's also a strategic choice in terms of, what we're putting our attention towards, or what I'm putting my attention towards as, operating the shop. And so that's been quite important. And we made the choice, I guess, not to have as many New Orleans artists in the shop, because we're friends with so many New Orleans artists that I knew that if I curated a number of our artist friends into the shop, we were going to have 5 times as many that said, Forrest, why aren't we on your shelves? What's the deal? And I didn't want to have to deal with the political pushback of that. And because we've been doing shows around the country for so long, and because my sister was based in Portland and in Burlington, Vermont, and in New York before moving to New Orleans, And then for the pandemic, leading up to the pandemic, she moved back to New York. So she's out of town. We have this broad swath of artist friends from around the country. And so while we have a handful of New Orleans artists that have been chosen very specifically, the majority of the art that we have there is work that's not available in other places in the city. And so we wanted to bring some interesting new looks to the town. And then when it came to celebrating our local artist friends, we wanted to do that more with events, with shows, instead of having them as part of our kind of permanent collection on the shelves.
That's a beautiful negotiation. And it's so radical to buy artwork outright. It's so rare. Yeah.
Well, we were really fortunate to be in a position to be able to do that. And, you know, we took money out of retirement accounts and decided that needed to be part of the business model. And it's been, so far, it's worked for us. We've been, it's really made things much easier, and it's helped to just not alienate any of the artists that we work with. You know, there's so many different ways for people can feel like their toes are getting stepped on along the way. Erasing a number of those different possibilities really ensures that we're really focusing on the relationship first and the artist first. And that's, I think that's really important, and it doesn't happen all the time. So we're proud of that approach.
That's real investment. Fantastic.
I will say that not having to do inventory, well, you probably still do inventory, but writing checks every month and all that probably is, yeah, saving that time is probably worth it.
It's been good. So far, it's been all right.
It's a lot of work every month. It's definitely something to think about. And, you as the owner, you either have to do that yourself or you have to hire someone. And that's probably going to be your biggest expense, will be, an employee. But then it's like, what do you want them doing? Do you want them doing your books? Do you want them making the gallery look good? Do you want them posting on social media? We can do it all, but there's only so much time in the day. So
yeah,
it's really important to figure out those roles, and it's very difficult to figure out. I think that you have to be decent enough at every facet of it, whether it's the client management, whether it's the art, managing the artistic production, doing the creative work, to build your line and collection and continue to inject creativity, into that, to do the bookkeeping, to do the research on the shows. There are a lot of hats to wear and a lot of skills that you need to be decent at. And you have to juggle and not let any of that fall out too much, but you can't be great at everything. And so you really need to have, I think, to be successful in this business, you have to have a very honest and clear understanding of sort of where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, especially when it comes to, partnership or just building your crew, your staff. And that's another amazing skill set to develop in and of itself.
yeah, you can't do it all. I was always taught, you're not going to be good at everything, but as far as if you can't do the business, then you either need to hire someone or marry someone who can do it. But if you can't do it, that's the first step. It still has to be done. So you can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
What was the level of education like, where what was it like to learn how to do the business skills, or even having had experience with doing shows and fairs and such? What was that investment of time like? And did you have programs that you reached out to, mentors again? Did someone suggest anything along the way?
Certainly for my business, which really I started just before Katrina, and then Katrina sort of, set everything, reset everything. And it took me about a year after Katrina to get back to the business that I started about 6 months before Katrina. And I would say that the Arts Council was really instrumental. Programs that they were running, workshops that they were offering, in terms of, sort of tracking financials. Thomas Mann, who's a jewelry designer in town here, was certainly an incredible mentor to me. And I went to a workshop that was done by the Arts Council in New Orleans, and he gave a really incredible workshop that largely was discussing how to price your work. Really taking into account all of the sort of general costs of the space in which you work, the time that it takes, figuring out how to make sense of all that. And in the little bit of mentorship that I've done with young artists here in New Orleans coming up, and just being involved with, more or less formal sort of advice giving to other artists around me, I really feel like it takes about 2 years to sort of get on top of knowing what the value of your work is, knowing what the market will bear, finding your footing. I really feel takes about 2 years from starting the business to really having a sense of understanding about the market at large that you're working within. Does that sound right to you, Andy? I'm curious. I'm curious if that resonates with you.
Yeah, probably. It's good to do your market research and see what you're, who you're competing with and all that. But I think also a lot of that as artists, we, like you had said, we intuit it a little bit. Like you feel like you kind of know it, but to put it on paper or to kind of lay it out and look at it logically, I think really, really helps to put it into a broader perspective.
For some painters, there's a square foot method, right? Well, this painting is so many square feet or a square inch, I'm sorry. And I just find that to be fraught with problems. There's so many subjective layers to putting a value on art, but thinking about what your work is in concert with, what it is, what other contexts, and how other people are pricing their work or having them being priced by galleries.
I'll tell you, working with some of the galleries, other galleries, what we are now, I feel like I've learned a lot, and they've helped me kind of, push the value or push my prices or educate me or, onto what things should be. I've learned a lot from my galleries that I've sold to as an artist. And I feel like we're playing that role now. We'll get artists that underprice or overprice, and we never balk at it. We're like, we'll stand behind that, but we have a discussion if it's been sitting there a while or something like that. We never want to say that something's worth less than what the artist feels like it's valued at. And we've even been known to raise prices on things that have sat there for a long time because it's been a steal for so long. It should be more. But yeah, it is one of the hardest things. There are formulas that I know a lot of the glassblowers use. There's a number of different schools of it, from the crafts to the arts to the, for me, it's the production glassblowers to the fine artists. I hate counting minutes when I'm working, but sometimes it's good to know what your profit margin is on certain items and where to put your time and what's selling and what colors are selling and what's not. Forrest and I talked earlier, and he's able to track a lot of that stuff on his point of sale system now. And we try to do that with colors. Like I can tell you cobalt blue is one of my best selling colors of all time. By 2 to 1 to most colors, so just an interesting tidbit there. But I know that when I'm making my work, when I'm getting ready for Jazz Fest or even restocking the gallery, I make sure I have a couple cobalt ones before I, make the other colors.
Yeah. It's so, I really feel like there's so much trial and error, and just being aware of what happens, each time. I feel like a lot of the pitfall seems to me to be when you're doing shows and you're not successful at the shows. There's one particular approach where you can complain about like the density of other similar art in your area or the feng shui of where you're placed in a field. And that happens a lot. But more honestly, it probably has to do with you needing to continue to workshop your work and make something that resonates more. Ultimately, we are people communicating some message through a medium. You know, this is creative self-expression, and we're reflecting our experience, our aesthetic experience of the world, and we're sharing that with somebody else in the hopes that they're going to feel that, and it's going to bring them joy. It's going to move them in some way. And that's the principal value. I mean, it really is a human thing. And so, you know, I think first, in order to be successful, you have to be able to be an authentic, engaged human. And Andy is a great example of that. Andy is so accessible and genuinely kind and considerate that, you know, he attracts people to him, and it's very easy for him to be able to navigate conversations and draw people in so that they're receptive to a conversation. And then he gets to share his creative vision, and setting that stage is really the foundation, I think, of all of our success in this business. And so I really, that's something that's not necessarily teachable per se. It's something that you just kind of, have, but by virtue of, living in the world and being engaged.
Kind of on that subject, what are the ways that you promote your brand? I see, Andy, I see your brand front and center, and with your QR code even. Oh, wow. Fun. What are the ways, other than engagement inside of your gallery, which I can tell there's such warm spaces. And Forrest, when we had the Ella Projects event at your gallery last year, we remarked on that earlier. It was such a place of wonder and warmth. How do y'all promote your brands in the rest of the world?
But advertising is really expensive. And so, I mean, as a small business, we really don't even look into it. It's just so cost prohibitive. And I don't know that we'll ever get that back, even if it's just $300 for an eighth of a page, this or that. We try, we'll do here and there, but we promote our brand, all the ways that we can, whatever's popular, from social media. And, we have Instagram and Facebook and all that. One of our artists here is a big TikToker. He's got like 300,000 followers. Like every video he posts gets 1 million views. And so we learn a lot from our young guys that come in the studio and stuff. I don't even have TikTok on my phone. I should download it. It does translate into sales. His Etsy account, he's constantly, whenever he posts a video, he gets Etsy notifications because he's making sales, and through that and Instagram. And I find that interesting because it's a different model than I use. But I think it's important, it's another form of media. You're competing there, regardless of whether it's television or radio or social media, like, Facebook and Instagram and all those. So all you can do is be consistent and post regularly. I had a nice new banner made for Jazz Fest this year, and I still have my business, Andrew Jackson Pollack Designs, which was me as an artist for many years before I had a hard location. And rebranding is very difficult. I still have that on paper as an LLC. I still, file it monthly. But then we also have this Pollack Glass Studio. And I think I'm slowly transitioning it to where I had Pollack Glass Studio in my booth as opposed to Andrew Jackson Pollack Designs, which was always a mouthful, but people seem to remember it. And it's similar looking logo and this and that, but you just do all you can to compete in that, whatever market it may be. We have a video monitor in the window. Our goal for last summer was to integrate light and sound and all that. So we put a video monitor in the window and some speakers and stuff to try to draw more people in off the sidewalk. But yeah, just doing whatever we can to kind of get our name out there organically using the social media and that kind of stuff. And other local resources, like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we benefit in this town, word of mouth is so important. This is such a small community and a tight-knit community that, in order to have this local coverage, just going out on a regular basis and just putting yourself out there is so good to create some momentum locally. But the one thing that I would add, we're using all the same sort of channels that Andrew just mentioned for our business. Social media is king, and so we really try to push engagement with social media in the shop. And but the one other thing that I would say that Andy didn't mention is, I really think for any artists from the get-go, it's a grind, and it's not necessarily the most fun thing to do, but collect names and email addresses from the outset, from the beginning of your business. Compile and compile and compile, and that you'll build a mailing list of people that have interacted with your brand, have seen your artwork, and that has really been incredibly useful for me in my business, and also for Leroy's Place for a broader project. We also
book at every show for sure. That's a great idea.
In the space in our gallery. The other thing is, retail is right. It's like traditional retail is in flux right now, and so when we built out the space physically, we made it really visually arresting. We purposefully sort of built odd angles and vantage points into the gallery, and we built installations in that really are unique and memorable. And so, I think that having that, keeping that, taking that into account, as opposed to just, building shelves and putting work on shelves and pedestals, creating an environment that really is much more engaging than the average shop that you would walk into, really makes a space memorable and helps to increase engagement in all the social media afterwards. And I think that's it's important to take that sort of holistic sort of approach into account now, because you need to distinguish yourself. There's so many different ways for people to engage, and it's if you have somebody in your shop, in your brick and mortar, or in your booth in a physical space, man, there's no better opportunity than that to really make the impression.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question, and then Tracy Popkin has brought up a great question thread. What about strategies to maximize your square footage, your actual square footage, including possible rental to other people and special events? Forrest, we were talking about your projects elsewhere, the puppet shows and such. That's a great way to maximize your brand and your community. What about within the gallery?
Within the shop itself, as I mentioned, we built all of these sculptural elements. We have characters that are part of my sister's painting. So they're characters that she paints that then have been turned into large sculptures that we can control and puppeteer. And so we have large trees that talk, that are built into the space, and we are dropping inventory from the branches of the trees. So we're not just working from the ground and from the walls, but we are also using the ceiling, and we're really creating an inclusive environment where there is dialogue between the different disparate art that's in the shop. There's dialogue between it. Some of it is perhaps like referential to pop culture in some way. Some of it is like color categorized or whimsical in the same way, or odd misunderstood characters in some way. And so there's like creating dialogue between the pieces of art has been a major focus of our approach. And then using the entirety of the space. I mean, we're blessed here in New Orleans because we've got these high ceilinged buildings typically that we can start from. And it's a shame to let all of that altitude above the 8 or 9 foot mark, go to waste. And so if there's a way to incorporate that, Not only does it serve the purpose of really creating a space that's more engaging, as I was talking about before, but it also serves the practical, benefit of just being able to give you more display space.
Awesome. Andy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Forrest has a really cool gallery. So if you haven't been down there, you need to check it out. We're talking about that all the time. And when we had right now it's summer slowdown. That's what we call it. June, July, August. Definitely, it just happened. It happens very quickly. All of a sudden, we'll have a day where nobody walks in the door. And I think we're there now. So those times of the years when we start talking about like, oh, we should put in a juice bar, or maybe we should put in a bar, or a brothel or something, we get a little crazy having these thoughts about what can we do to maximize. We have a great space here, but there's, it's me and one of my buddies here right now working some glass right now. It's quiet. But yeah, so you do have to think about what you're gonna set up for your floor space and how to maximize profits, and lay it out on a map. Maybe even make little cutouts for each of your display cases so you can move them around, and then track that as you get going. But right now, just this was a quick list off the top of my head. This business is split into the gallery and the studio, and in the gallery we have gallery sales for local artists that we get a percentage of, and then also my work that I get a check each month. We do a lot of commissions that either are from me or through the gallery. We love that when people approach us with some random glass thing that has nothing to do with my artwork, that generally we can point them in the right direction. Oftentimes we just hand them off to the artist. We say, oh, 20% on commissions or something, but we're friends with everybody. We're with all of our artists, and we're pretty, loosey-goosey there. Maybe we should be more tighter. And, if you put a lot of those things in writing from the get-go, then, it's a slippery slope. So if you start off, with one thing, then generally you can make that stick. We obviously did. But we sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned something really key, paying yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely a labor of love. I don't get a paycheck for the hours that I'm here. I get a paycheck for my sales each month, and I'm one of the better, most of my work sells in my own gallery here. And I even give myself a percentage of commission when I sell a piece. I get a slightly larger percentage than, maybe the 60-40, but I still give a good percentage back to the gallery for operating expenses and that kind of stuff, or if nothing else, just for the commission for whoever sold it. And I think that is a good incentive. But, when you're talking about a 60-40 split, and then you're giving 10% commission, that only leaves 10% or 30% that goes to the gallery, and bills and insurance and all that are very expensive. And so it becomes a volume business. You really have to make a lot of sales for that to be what we're dependent on. In the gallery, just to continue, we do a lot of collaborations. We do shows and pop-ups and artist receptions. We have classes that will bring in visiting artists, and we'll do pop-ups or receptions for them. And we do events. We have a kitchen in the back. And then in the studio, we have weekly classes. We have bigger workshops with visiting artists that people will fly in from out of town for. It's my space that I work. I have my own, I'm one of the renters, I have this is where I work. And then we also have a table that we can have where our students come and rent by the hour, or sometimes by the day, or sometimes by the week. Sometimes we have artists that just pass through town and they'll rent for a day or a week or a month. A lot of times that ends up in collaborations. Collaboration's really big in our community right now, especially with social media. People cross post and, things go viral, and, we love working with each other. Again, glass blowers are very, very passionate. And then we even do free open studio times where we let some of these students and stuff come in and kind of do work for free, maybe during one of our openings, so that we can have people kind of working while we're open. We also support a nonprofit called Beads of Courage, which donates beads to children with terminal illnesses. And so we'll oftentimes do a Beads of Courage Day or an open torch time for that. And so, yeah, these are all the different things that we're doing to, not be doing one thing. When one thing's doing well, something else might not be. And, it's just doing all the things. I get my glass in bulk, I sell it back to the students, and that kind of at a fair price, you know. But so yeah, these are all the different things that you have to do to make ends meet.
Multiple
That's great.
revenue.
I want to, do you mind if I touch on one more thing? There's, and Andy mentioned a conversation we were having earlier today, and there's one thing that I think is really emblematic of, again, maximizing the good for the square footage that you have in order to ensure that you're really, not losing out. When we initially opened up the gallery, we had a bunch of different work. And like I said, we're kind of a hybrid between art gallery and there's a gift shop element to the thing. We had a small part of our wall that was funny socks done by mostly artists, but there were a couple of sort of novelty socks that were ridiculous that we liked. So we had this little collection of socks that we had in there for about a year. The beauty of having a POS system and having all of the work in the POS system let me look in a granular way. And I've been in my life of doing my jewelry business, I've been keeping sort of notes. I certainly have all my sales figures from through the years, which I can then look at a venue and say, all right, New Orleans Art Market is yielding this, and Voodoo Fest yielded this. And, I could look at all that, but is there really any good information to glean from that? I don't know. You could find all sorts of patterns, but I don't know if that's useful. On the other hand, with this POS system, I was able to look at the sock sales in this space in the gallery for the year and say, all right, this is yielding $5-6 per pair of socks that we sell. We don't sell a ton of them. We know tons of great artists. Maybe we should take this sock wall down and put up art prints instead. We put up art prints, and that's generated almost an extra $20,000 of revenue versus the stocks since we changed that. Just as gross revenue. And that's that's incredible to be able to sort of look at things granularly and pinpoint where you can make adjustments like that. And it ultimately fortifies our sort of art credentials in the shop at the same time as bringing in, more revenue, at the same time as supporting more individual artists, so it's a benefit for, all around. And that's been, that's just one specific anecdote of something, a modification that we made recently that really has been impactful.
Fantastic. That's a great illustration of a successful system. Yeah, good. Do you mind if I read out Tracy Popkins' questions?
No.
Let's see. She's asking if you two can speak to the pragmatic steps involved in getting the gallery set up. Did you use a commercial realtor? And what kind of deposits and assurances are required to get a commercial lease? And are there unexpected aspects to that process?
There's always unexpected. I would use a realtor. It can't hurt. Generally, it's the business that ends up paying them if it's listed with a commercial realtor. I'm not sure if the tenant, I don't think, comes out of pocket on that if it's listed through a commercial realtor. I'm not 100% on that, but it can't hurt. I mean, they really have access to like all the listings.
I think you're right.
Come up. There's a lot of listings out there. I think the best listings are going to get jumped on right away, but I don't think there's a shortage of good spaces these days. I see lots of vacancies on Magazine Street, in the Quarter, things coming and going all the time. You may want to be ready to jump on it. But the biggest unexpected was insurance, and insurance keeps going up and up. And you may want to work with, your local codes and stuff to find out what it is you're required to have. You may need something on the building. You may need something separate for the contents, depending on the amount and depending on what it is you're selling. You can find all this. You might have to go through a third party, but it's great to work with an insurance agent on that as well. They will take a percentage that you do end up paying for, but it's there may be some shopping around depending on what you're doing. If it's just standard business insurance, I have a glass studio. We have fire. They didn't even know how to classify it. We have there are other renters above us in the space above us. That made a big difference in how we were building out the space. So we had to talk to the fire marshal and follow local code and get proper insurance. And they had to make sure all that was in place before we could, so that was unexpected. It was a lot of hoops, but there's a lot of resources out there. NOLA.gov, I think it is, one of them has like a step-by-step on how to open a business in Orleans Parish and what you need to do in what order, because it is a little overwhelming, but in the end, it's really not. It's pretty step-by-step. It's doable, but it's a long process between looking for the right place and coming up with a business plan and jumping in,
Yeah, in my experience, I think that the figuring out the insurance sort of component of it. I used commercial realtor. We were, we ended up signing a lease in June of 21. We started looking at places in February of 21. So that was, I think, the month that the first swath of people got COVID vaccines.
Mhm.
So we made a decision to, my studio that I produced my jewelry in was a building that was destroyed after Katrina. And I was able to buy that building on my little art business salary after Katrina. And I was able to rebuild it and develop my business in that building. That was disaster investment. And for me, in my experience, disaster investment was what helped me initiate, my business and be able to thrive in the way that I did. And after the getting, the crazy experience of going through COVID and wondering if our community was even going to, be here in the aftermath of it, I realized I took a cue from that initial experience and said, you know what, maybe now is the time to go and look for something and see what's going on. And so in the quarter, when I started looking, there was so much property available. And I think that we were able to rent our space for maybe a few thousand less than it was rented for before COVID. And it's still expensive. It's still a huge lift, but I think that right now the market is very, very unusual. And so you can find great spaces all over the city. And if you're diligent, you can find good spaces for a good price. That's been my experience. And that's been the experience of a handful of my friends that have also opened up galleries in the last year. And so I think I can say that with confidence, at least here in New Orleans. The insurance piece, get a broker, that'll help out. City Hall is a little bit more difficult to navigate. And that is not intuitive, and they're not always helpful. You don't always get the best advice. And so I really recommend when establishing that piece of it, getting your occupational licenses and all of the business sort of documents in order. If you run into somebody who is obstructionist, or who you feel is not really helping you out, then just breathe through it and come in a little bit later and find somebody else. That's been my experience again and again in City Hall. It's not always terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but oftentimes I run into people that are not helpful. And sometimes you just have to say, you know what, today's not my day. I have to eat this hour and I have to come back here another time and find another employee that might be willing to help me out more, because you can really get into trouble. People will have you jump through hoops and do a lot of things that you don't actually need to do, or people will not help you do the things that you need to do. And then you'll find yourself in a position where you need to pay fines and penalties after the fact. And so I just really recommend that is not a fun part of starting the business and getting the business established, but it is so important to do it correctly because it will catch up with you at some point if you don't.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, there are good people there that will help you, I will say, but we'll run into both. So that really is sage advice.
Thank you. We're going to open it up to questions. If those joining us would like to, if you would like to raise your hand, or if you would like to type a question in. Security cameras. Experience with that?
Hey, Janice. I know Janice. One of my teachers. We have some security cameras. Remember to keep them charged if they're not plugged in. We've slowly gotten them all hardwired. It's good to have for insurance purposes as well. We've been lucky. We've never had any problems, but I think it couldn't hurt to have. And a lot of times having a security system or even cameras will help save on insurance a little bit. Yeah, it will help a little bit. And commercial insurance is like exorbitant compared to residential. And it's gone up recently. So if you're having to get a new policy, definitely shop around, but expect it to be, you know, twice as much as it was 10 years ago. It's kind of crazy.
Certainly with the just homeowners insurance and flood insurance and all the hazards of the last few years.
Yeah.
Certainly.
I would say insurance, I mean, the security cameras are almost in, I think that they are more useful to protect you from suit, to protect you from if there's, I mean, being in the quarter, we have people that come in that are dealing with mental health stuff on a pretty regular basis, that we have to figure out how to delicately like move out of the store, or just keep an eye on them, make sure that everything is okay, and that there's not like, you know, I mean, literally like a schizophrenic break isn't going to happen in the moment. Having a record of interaction is a really great safety precaution, and I think anybody can justify it for exactly what Andy said. The cost benefit will come out in your favor installing the cameras on your insurance costs over a few cycles. And so there's no reason not to have security cameras. But I really think that the benefit is, you know, that there's a piece that may be a little bit of a deterrence, but I think that anybody that's going to steal from you is just kind of going to steal from you, irrespective of whether you have a camera up or not. It might help you catch a glimpse of them and be able to just let your neighbors know who might have done the bad behavior. But really, I think more the greatest benefit of the camera is if somebody, you know, if there's an altercation in the shop, or if there's a crazy situation that plays out that's just beyond your control, you can just have a record to protect yourself from suit down the road.
Good point.
I see Janice also asked about, like, do you need to have a sign that you have security cameras? And I don't know what the legalities on that are. It may be different area to area. I know there was like a court case like many, many years ago saying that if you're in the public eye, if it's somewhere that you could, you know, reasonably get a picture from, that it's fair game. You know, I'm not a lawyer. Maybe there might be some people in the group that can answer that question, but I don't know that you legally have to post that you are recording when they're in your space. I really don't know the answer to that. I'm not qualified, but I think that might have been where she was coming from, asking about security cameras.
Any other questions?
So you're talking about a point of sale system. When you, like I use Square, right? And I can track the categories of what sells more. Are you using a different system where you can kind of put in keywords, not just say color but like shapes or whatever, and then track that as well? How detailed are you adding information into your point of sale system?
Our Square system that we do use Square's point of sale also, and it is not so terribly robust in that way. And one of the limitations of Square is that it doesn't auto-populate to, if you're building a website. Like if I have all of my products in Square, I can't take that data set and auto-populate that. You can with Shopify. That's the main benefit of Shopify, and that's their Shopify is a more robust system, and you can do a lot more of that. And then you have all of the keywords and things like that you would want for all the meta tagging for building your online, you know, product group. So in that sense, I don't know if Square is the best point of sale to use. I found it to be pretty intuitive, and I found it to work pretty well for most of what we need to do. But now that we are shifting to move a bunch of our products online, this is the first time that we've encountered kind of, design limitations of the software. And so, yeah, on the other hand, though, I mean, in terms of financial tracking, you can really look at it in a granular way at categories of products. So we have just our basic like ceramics, three-dimensional sculpture, wall sculpture, jewelry, because we've got a really broad product collection in the shop in general. It's nice to be able to look at it like that. We can look at it by artist, and then the interfaces are a couple. So we can do a keyword search, or you can do a visual button interface. And so between the headings and the subheadings, and between the two different types of interfaces, it gives you a good amount of options to figure out what your preferred user interface is. So I don't really, I've liked Square for the most part. I think that it's been a pretty easy system to navigate and use. It's been pretty intuitive for me and for all of my crew. We have 4 part-time employees that are working in the shop with us, or part to full-time employees that are working in the shop with us. So there are 5 of us on the floor throughout the course of the week, and nobody's had too much of a difficulty getting used to that system at all.
Great.
We're using Square as well. And yeah, it can be a little bit of an issue if you're creating a website and you want something sells online, you have to, take it out of the gallery, or God forbid it sells them both at the same time. It's rarity, but it's nice for the two to be able to talk to each other. I know you can build websites through Square now. I'm not sure if it will talk that way or if their websites are even any good. But yeah, we have everything that's on the website has a highlighter on the tag in the gallery, and that's our system. So, kind of a analog digital hybrid system there.
I've worked in other galleries and I'm looking to open my own, and we've used like a gallery database like Masterpiece, which allows you to interface, and then you can link it up to your QuickBooks. So you guys haven't done anything like that where you've kind of worked from a database and allowed, to input your items that way and track your items?
Yeah, I haven't. Personally, I haven't. With my jewelry design, I don't do a lot of repetitions. I do sort of like one of a kind or two of a kind, or I do a series of 5 that have slight variations, and it makes it really cumbersome to try to track it. And so this new version of putting everything into the Square with descriptions and things is a huge step up from anything that I did in terms of inventory tracking before. And I haven't run into, I do the bookkeeping personally for the shop. And so I'm keeping pretty close track just through the bookkeeping and through and just the day-to-day, just working on the floor and visually seeing the inventory and dealing with moving the inventory from the back stock to the floor. I haven't run into any problems. The limitation that I have found, the one issue is exactly that, is if something sells online, and I that same day sold it off the floor. That is the one problem, because there's not parallel inventory tracking with online and within the shop with Square. There is with Shopify. And so if you have a really robust like online business, I think that might be a better option for a POS system, at least right now, immediately. Although they're obviously putting out new versions all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys are, so I mean, I guess that like what the larger galleries are using for their inventory and tracking and can link all of these things together, you guys are kind of more, you're more kind of creating your own thing and bungling it together to try and get what you need out of it.
Yeah, kind of the extension of what we were doing at the art markets, it sounds like. And it was kind of the in thing when we were 5 years ago or whatever, but I would do that research. Like, it is always changing. And I guarantee you there's a best POS system for 2023 list out there that you may want to look at a couple, because they may be biased, or they may be, put out by one company and you don't even know it. But if a few of them are saying, try this one, I know Shopify is a big one.
Clover,
that'd be a good
Clover
one.
is the other one. Clover, Square, and Shopify are
Clover,
the
yeah.
three players
And-
right now.
And we do export from Square directly into QuickBooks, but yeah, we can't manage our data elsewhere and have it all exported into multiple, the other way around, basically. It would be nice. We've talked about it, at this point, it would require a whole new website and all that. And it would have been something great to do during the pandemic. But we really did just beef up our, what we were using. And I think it can be done, directly in Square, even though there may be other better, more efficient ways. So find what works for you.
But these
Yeah,
systems
I
you're
just-
using, are they generating your labels or your price tags or anything like that? Or you're doing those by hand as well?
Well, you can do,
They
they
can.
all have, Square has the add-on components. So you can put in a barcode scanner, and then you can create individual, barcodes for the product. I mean, all of those are sort of like add-on accessories, depending on how you're operating. So they have label makers, they have barcode scanners and all of that work with that. But for me, just for instance, I don't know if this is, I don't know if this is helpful, but when we have an artist, Tom Copian, that we have in the shop. When we get a box of artwork from him, let's say we've got 3 sculptures that he made, we literally just go and we have a Tom Copian category in the Square that's already there. And we literally just go in, new listing, do a description of it, say a color, colors of the piece, a descriptor of the piece, the price, the quantity, and it's there. And when it sells, it sells. If it's a product, let's say going back to art prints, if we have if I miscounted the art prints and the Square thinks that I have 20 of the art prints and it turned out that I have 25 and we've sold through 20 of them, and I'm trying to check somebody out, it will just say low quantity. Do you want to continue anyway? So it's the workflow is very easy and intuitive. The prompts are easy. Putting the new work into the system it takes seconds. And so it really is, it's very easy to track the work through Square.
Thank you, gentlemen. I encourage everybody to go see Forrest Bacigalupi's gallery, Leroy's Place on Royal Street. It's magical and inviting, and please go visit Andrew Jackson Pollack's Pollack Glass Studio Gallery and maybe take a class or two. Thank you to Jean Maneri. Thank you to Heather Pantonio for your support. And of course, Ashley Keaton, our Ella Project hosts and peoples. And please watch out for programming up on the Ella Project website and Facebook page. And thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure participating in this, and I really appreciate your questions and so much knowledge here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Veronica.
Great. Thank you, guys.